Sign here, Dad, the transfer is just a formality. My son said it like he was asking me to sign a birthday card. I almost did it. I had the pen in my hand. I remember the weight of it. One of those cheap ballpoints from the kitchen drawer, the kind that leaves ink smudges on the side of your hand. And I remember thinking, this doesn't feel right. Not the pen. The whole thing. I set it down. My son. I'll call him my son because that's what he is even now. Even after everything, he looked at me the way you look at someone who's being difficult for no reason. That particular look, like I was a problem to be managed. Dad, it's literally just paperwork. That was a Thursday in November. Cold front had pushed in overnight. The kind that makes your knees ache before you even get out of bed. I was 67 years old, recently retired from 31 years in commercial insurance. And I owned outright, no mortgage, no liens, free and clear. A 2-bedroom condo on the 14th floor of a building in downtown Nashville. I'd bought it in 2019 after my wife passed. Sold the family house in Brentwood because I couldn't walk past her garden every morning anymore. Paid $490,000 cash for the condo. By last year, it was worth somewhere close to $900,000. A realtor told me that without me even asking. My son is 38. His name is Garrett. He married a woman named Paige 6 years ago, and they have 2 kids. I love more than anything on this earth. They live in Murfreesboro, about 30 minutes out. For a while, things were good between us. Sunday dinners. Calls on my birthday. The grandkids would fall asleep on my couch watching movies, and I'd cover them with the blanket my wife had crocheted. I don't know exactly when it changed. These things don't happen like a switch. They happen like a slow leak. You don't notice until you're standing in water. The first sign was money. It's almost always money. Garrett had started a home renovation business 3 years ago. Poured everything into it. I'd helped him. $15,000 to buy equipment. Another $8,000 when a client sued him and he needed a lawyer. I didn't ask for any of it back. He's my son. That's not how I think about money between family. But somewhere along the way, the course shifted. He stopped asking how I was feeling before he asked if I could help him with something. The grandkids still came over, but Paige always seemed to be in a hurry to leave. And Garrett started talking about my condo the way people talk about something they've already decided belongs to them. You know, Dad, a place like this, at your age, it's a lot to maintain. You ever think about moving somewhere smaller? More practical? Have you updated your estate plan? You really should think about who gets what. I'm not a stupid man. I spent 31 years reading contracts and assessing risk for a living. I heard what he was actually saying. What I didn't know, not yet, was how far he was willing to take it. It was my neighbor who first told me. Her name is Ruth Ann, 72, sharp as a tack, retired schoolteacher from Kentucky. She lives 2 doors down, and we've had a habit of sharing coffee on Saturday mornings when the weather's decent. One Saturday in early October, she knocked on my door looking uncomfortable. "Harold," she said. "That's my name. Harold Payne. I don't know if this is my place, but I think you need to know something." She'd been in the lobby the previous Wednesday. She'd seen Garrett there with a man she didn't recognize. They were looking at something on a tablet, and she caught just a piece of the conversation before the elevator came. The other man said something about the current market value and timeline for transfer. I thanked her. I told her I was sure it was nothing. I wasn't sure, not even a little. That afternoon I called my attorney, a man I'd used for estate planning a few years back. Retired now, but he pointed me to a colleague of his, a woman named Stein, sharp and no-nonsense, who I met with the following Monday. I told her what Ruth Ann had seen. I told her about the conversations Garrett had been having with me. I told her about the paperwork he'd presented on that Thursday in November, which, when I looked at it again, I realized I had never actually read carefully. I'd assumed it was what he said it was. It wasn't. It was a quitclaim deed. If I had signed it, I would have transferred ownership of my condo to Garrett outright. No payment, no conditions. Just gone. Miss Stein said it quietly and without drama, the way serious people deliver serious news. "Mr. Payne, if you had signed this, you would have no legal recourse. It would have been a voluntary transfer." I sat with that for a moment. Then I asked her what we could do. She advised me not to confront Garrett yet, not to let on that I knew. She said if he was planning something, the best thing I could do was create a paper trail that protected me and watch to see what he did next. I went home. I sat in my living room and I looked at the framed photo on the bookshelf. Garrett at maybe 10 years old, gap-toothed smile, holding up a fish he'd caught at my brother's lake house. I remembered how proud he was of that fish, how he made me take 4 pictures because he wanted to make sure we got a good one. I cried a little. I'm not ashamed of that. Then I dried my face and I called Miss Stein back and I told her I was ready to do whatever needed to be done. Over the next 6 weeks, we put several things in place. First, I had the condo formally retitled to a revocable living trust. This meant that even if someone somehow got me to sign something under duress or confusion, the trust structure added a layer of protection that a simple signature couldn't undo. Second, Ms. Stein advised me to install a small recording device in my living room. Tennessee is a one-party consent state, which means I'm allowed to record conversations I'm a part of. I don't love the idea of recording my own son, but I loved even less the idea of being out on the street at 67. Third, and this is the part that still makes my chest hurt a little, I stopped pretending I didn't know. Not with Garrett, not yet, but with myself. My son was trying to take my home. He came back in early December. This time he brought Paige and she had a folder with her. Printed documents, official looking, with tabs marking the signature lines. Garrett sat across from me at my kitchen table and he looked me in the eye and he said, "Dad, we've been talking, and we're worried about you. Paige's cousin works in elder law, and she says a lot of seniors get taken advantage of. We want to make sure you're protected." He said this with a straight face. Paige nodded along. She had that look people get when they've rehearsed their role in something. "This is just about protecting your assets," Garrett said. "We'd hold the condo in our name temporarily, and once you need to transition to assisted living or whatever comes next, everything is already taken care of." I looked at the documents. Then I looked at my son. I said, "Let me read through these tonight and we'll talk." He looked relieved. He patted my hand. He said, "Of course, Dad. Take your time." They left. I sat at the table for a long time after. The folder was sitting there open and I could see my name printed on the deed transfer. Harold James Payne, grantor. The space where my signature was supposed to go was marked with a little yellow sticky arrow. I called Miss Stein. I called my younger brother Roy in Memphis. Roy and I had not always been close, but we'd gotten closer since his wife got sick 2 years ago, and something about mutual loss was strip away the distance between people. I told him everything. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Harold, what do you need me to do?" I told him. What Roy did was drive up to Nashville the following weekend without telling Garrett he was coming. He'd been close with Garrett growing up. The fun uncle, the one who taught him to drive stick shift and never told on him when he stayed out past curfew. Garrett trusted him. Roy took his nephew out for barbecue and, without tipping his hand, asked how the renovation business was going. It was not going well. Garrett owed somewhere north of $40,000 to subcontractors. He'd taken on a commercial project that went sideways and the client was threatening to sue. He'd taken out a home equity line on his house in Murfreesboro to cover payroll, and it was nearly maxed. He hadn't told Paige the full picture. He hadn't told anyone. He told Roy. Roy came back to my condo that evening and sat down at my kitchen table and told me what Garrett had said, and he had tears in his eyes that he was working hard not to let fall. And he said, "I don't think he's a bad person, Harold. I think he's a scared person who made a terrible decision." I understood that. I even had some compassion for it. But a scared person making a terrible decision can still put you out on the street. The following week, Garrett called and asked if I'd had a chance to look over the documents. I said yes. I said I had some questions. Could he come by on Saturday? He said, "Sure, Dad. Of course." Saturday came. Garrett showed up alone. Paige was home with the kids. He sat in my living room, and before he could launch into whatever he'd prepared to say, I put a manila folder on the coffee table between us. "I've been doing some reading," I said. He looked at the folder warily. "Okay." A quitclaim deed, I said, is not a protection measure, Garrett. It's a transfer. If I sign that document, I no longer own this condo. You do. He opened his mouth. I kept talking. I also know about the $40,000 you owe your subs. I know about the commercial project. I know about the HELOC. The color left his face. I'm not angry at you for being in trouble, I said, and I meant it. I've been in trouble. Your grandfather was in trouble during the '08 crash and lost his hardware store after 40 years. Hard times are not a moral failing. He was very still, but coming into my home with forged-looking paperwork and telling me it's for my protection, that I cannot let go. He tried to say something. I heard it crack in his throat before it came out. Dad, let me finish. He went quiet. I told him that I had spoken with Miss Stein. I told him that the condo was now in a trust that he had no access to, no claim on, and that any attempt to file or record the quitclaim deed would be considered fraud since I had never signed it. I told him that I had a recording of our conversation the Saturday he and Paige had come with the folder, because in my living room, on the shelf behind the television, there had been a small device running since the first week of November. I don't know what he expected from me. Maybe he thought I'd be too confused to catch it. Maybe he thought I was already halfway gone and just needed a push. When I tell you he looked like a child who'd been caught, that's the only way I can describe it. Not a guilty man. A child. And for a moment I saw the 10-year-old at the lake with his fish, and I had to breathe through it. What happens now, he said. That depends on you, I told him. I did not call the police. I want to be clear about that decision because some people will think I should have. Maybe they're right. But here is what I thought about. My grandchildren, who are 8 and 5 and have no part in any of this. A fraud charge follows a person. It follows their kids when they're applying for college, when they're looking for work, when they're trying to build something. I thought about that. What I required instead was this. Garrett would sign a notarized letter acknowledging that he had presented me with a deed transfer document while misrepresenting its purpose. He would sign it in front of Miss Stein and Roy. He would not contact me about money, property, or my estate again without a neutral third party present. And he would get his business in order. Not because I was going to bail him out, but because I told him there were legitimate options, an SBA loan, a business consultant the Chamber of Commerce could refer him to, a payment plan with his contractors. I gave him a list. I told him Roy would help him make the calls if he needed it. He sat there for a long time. Then he said, "I'm sorry, Dad." I believed him. I also knew that sorry doesn't unring a bell, and that trust, once dropped, doesn't land the same when you pick it back up. "I know you are," I said. He signed the letter 10 days later. Roy drove up again. Miss Stein brought a notary. Garrett sat at my kitchen table in the same chair he'd sat in every Christmas morning as a kid, waiting to open presents, and he signed his name at the bottom of a document that acknowledged he had tried to take something from his father that wasn't his to take. Nobody said much. It wasn't a moment for speeches. Afterward, Roy and I ordered pizza and watched the Tennessee game. It wasn't a happy evening exactly, but it was a real one. I fell asleep in my chair during the fourth quarter, and Roy turned off the TV and left without waking me up, the way he used to when we were kids, sharing a room, and he'd come in late. I still live in the condo on the 14th floor. I still have coffee with Wuzan on Saturday mornings when the weather is decent. I still have photos of Garrett on the bookshelf. I didn't take them down. That felt like too much. The grandkids came for Christmas. Garrett was quiet. Paige was polite. I held my granddaughter while she showed me a book she'd gotten about horses, and I thought, this is why. This is the whole reason. My son and I don't talk the way we used to. Maybe that changes someday. Maybe it doesn't. I'm 67 years old, and I've learned that some things heal and some things scar over, and the best you can do is know the difference. What I know for certain is this. I own my home. My name is on the trust. The papers are filed, and the pen I didn't sign with is still in the kitchen drawer right where I left it. People ask me sometimes if I regret not pressing charges. I've thought about it a lot, more than I expected to, honestly. And what I keep coming back to is this. The decision I made wasn't about letting Garrett off the hook. It was about what kind of man I wanted to be when it was over. There's something that happens when you get older, or at least it happened to me, where you start to see consequences differently. Not as punishment coming from outside, but as something that grows directly out of what a person does. Garrett didn't fail because the universe dealt him a bad hand. He failed because he chose to handle a real problem, debt, fear, shame, by reaching for something that wasn't his. That choice had a weight to it. It still does. He signed that letter. He sat at my kitchen table and put his name on a document that said, in plain language, that he had tried to deceive his father. That follows a person. It doesn't need me to add anything to it. What I learned from all of it, though, isn't really about Garrett. It's about me, about the moment I set that pen down. I've thought about that moment more than any other. The pen in my hand. The cheap ballpoint from the drawer. I almost signed. And if I'd told myself it was fine, that my son wouldn't really hurt me, that I was being paranoid, I would have lost everything and had no one to blame but myself. The will to stop, to say this doesn't feel right and actually listen to that feeling. That's not something that just happens. You have to build it, over years, over decisions. Ruth Ann knocked on my door because she paid attention and had the courage to say something uncomfortable to a neighbor. Roy drove 4 hours, because when I needed him, I asked, and I'd spent enough years being his brother that he showed up. Miss Stein knew exactly what a quitclaim deed meant because she'd spent a career learning things precisely so people couldn't be fooled by them. Every person who helped me got there through their own choices, through being curious, being diligent, being willing to show up for someone else. That's the thing about integrity. It doesn't announce itself. It just sits there, quiet, in a drawer, until the moment you need it. I'm 67. I have aching knees in a condo I own outright and a granddaughter who loves horses. I have a brother who drives up from Memphis without being asked twice. I have a neighbor who shares coffee with me on Saturday mornings and tells me the truth even when it's awkward. I also have a son. I'm not sure I'll ever fully trust again. And I've made a kind of peace with that. Some things don't go back to the way they were. You grieve that quietly and you keep going. What I want, if you're listening to this and something in it feels familiar, is for you to set the pen down, whatever your version of the pen is. Don't let exhaustion or loneliness or love make you sign something you know isn't right. Pay attention to what people do, not just what they say. Build the kind of life where Rutan is knock on your door, where Roy's answer the phone, where you got a Ms. Stein in your corner before you ever need her. The pen I didn't sign with is still in the kitchen drawer. That's the whole story.